Yeah, everything's done. All right, folks. Looks like we have a little bit of a smaller group today, but that's awesome that you're here. So I want to welcome you to the third neighborhood meeting for the Tapestry Condos project. My name is Em. If we do have anybody here who's interested in getting interpretation for Spanish, we do have an interpreter. And our slides are also interpreted, so hopefully that's helpful. If you need a copy of the Spanish language slides, they're right here. As well as a couple other handouts that could be helpful for you. One of them should have been included in the letter that you received at the meeting. The other one is brand new. And it's good to take home. So we will go ahead and get started. And if folks trickle in, they're just welcome to sit. Y'all are welcome to move forward if you like. We can keep it really casual and have a good conversation about this project. I would also like to introduce Leo, who is going to be co-facilitating with me as well. So you'll get to know him a little bit better too. So the general kind of agenda for this meeting, we will have a brief presentation. We don't have a ton of new information to present for you all. If you weren't at the previous meetings, we do have those meetings recorded and posted online. So if you'd like, the link to that is located on this document. But today we'll be talking about a little bit of a different aspect about this project, which has to do with the zoning of the project, and a little bit less about the actual building itself, although we're happy to answer some questions about the buildings if you have them as well. Then we'll move on to Q&A, and hopefully the majority of the evening will be that Q&A portion. So we're happy to take questions. You're also able to make comments. We are recording again this meeting, and we'll go ahead and keep that as a record of comments made at the meeting. But it's also a really good chance for you all to ask questions of the people who are working on the project. We have lots of our applicant team here. We've got several city staff to answer a wide variety of questions that you may have. And then I'll give you some next steps to kind of move forward and continue to engage on this project. I will let you know right off the bat, this will be the third out of 4 neighborhood meetings for this project. The 4th neighborhood meeting we haven't scheduled yet, but we'll talk a little bit about that process as well. So I'm going to pass it over to the planner on the project. Shauna is going to talk about the zoning and what's going on and why we're having this neighborhood meeting.
Good evening, everyone. Show of hands if you have not attended a meeting for something related to this project before. Oh, great, a few folks. So I'll be covering some information that you would have seen at a previous meeting. And then, as mentioned, there'll be a time for Q&A. And if you have more in-depth questions, staff will be available after the meeting as well if you'd like to chat with any of us. So there's 3 primary focuses of the meeting tonight. One is to talk about the difference between a rezoning and an addition of permitted use process. If you were here for the first meeting of these 3, we discussed what a rezoning is, and the applicant at that time was planning to submit a rezoning application, which they did. And now we have changed courses and are going down an APU route. So we will explain in this meeting why and what an APU is. We will also be discussing what this means for all of you in terms of what types of notices you'll get, or what types of public participation are available to you. Go to the next slide. And as Ann mentioned, there are Spanish slides after the English slides. So if you see them varying, that's what's going on. So where we're at, as we mentioned, this is the 3rd neighborhood meeting. That first one is when we talked about the rezoning and that process. Then the applicant team at the next meeting presented their preliminary plans for the property. And we refer to that type of application as a project development plan. Shorthanded a PDP application. And so those were held April 17th, May 15th, and now we're here at the 3rd meeting. You can go to the next slide. So just a little bit about kind of what this process is. This is part of an official development review process, which is determined by what we call the land use code. So a land use code is the city's primary regulatory tool to implement the community's vision for these types of plans. So some of you may have been involved in the processes to update these plans over the past few years. But we recently updated our comprehensive plan, which we call city plan, our housing strategic plan, our transit master plan, and our plan the future plan. So those plans really outline what is the Fort Collins larger vision for the community and how do we achieve that over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. And so then we update our codes like the land use code to continue to figure out how we implement that vision when it comes to site by site development. So you can go to the next slide. So just a little refresher on the site. Just north of here is the property that we're going to be discussing tonight. So it's located at the southeast corner of Buckingham Street and 3rd Street. It's approximately 7.5 acres. And it abuts the Buckingham neighborhood, which most of you are familiar with, and Colorado Metal and Iron to the east. And then it is adjacent. We'll talk about the adjacent zoning here in a minute. But it is adjacent to industrial as well. That's what Colorado Metal and Iron is. And so there will be a buffer yard requirement as part of that plan development. We can go to the next slide. This is just an aerial, no current development on the site. Go to the next slide. So as many of you may know, the property is currently zoned industrial. So with the reading application, that would have changed the zoning of the entire property. That is no longer the direction, and we'll talk about that more. So it will remain industrial. And the surrounding zoning, as I mentioned, Colorado Metal and Iron is industrial. Odell, this site that we're on now is actually part of the downtown zone district. And then the Buckingham neighborhood is RL, which is a low density residential neighborhood zoning. Can we go to the next slide? So just a little bit about what the purposes of those zone districts are. So downtown, which is where we are now, there's different sub-districts within the downtown. This sub-district is called the innovation sub-district. So that's usually areas that were formerly industrial, and are promoting some type of employment or innovation type of uses. We often see this zoning around the edges of the downtown zone district, and they tend to reflect an industrial character and more of the river landscape. As I mentioned, the neighborhood just to the west is RL, or low density residential. So that's primarily going to be single family residents. Go to the next slide. So a little bit about industrial. The types of uses that you're often going to see there are things like manufacturing, warehouses, distribution centers, indoor and outdoor storage, and a wide range of commercial and industrial operations. So that is what the property is currently zoned and will remain. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit about the purpose of the APU. So an addition of permitted use allows for approval of a particular land use. So when we talk about land uses, that's things like multifamily. That's this type of project is multifamily. So that's what we mean by a land use, is any type of varying type of business you can think of it as, or a particular type of housing. So it's looking for a particular land use on a specific parcel within a zone district that otherwise does not permit this use. So industrial does not permit residential uses because you wouldn't want residential, they can have conflicts, which is why we have things like buffer yard standards, right? And so with the APU, we're looking at what does the context of this site and the surrounding area, what feels appropriate for that site, right? And so there's specific things that we're looking for, things like heightened attention to compatibility and mitigating any possible impacts. We're considering unique circumstances on the specific parcel and evaluating more of the surrounding context. And the hope is that we can encourage dialogue and collaboration so that we can create something that fits really well within that specific context. So as I mentioned before, you can go to the next slide. This is more detail about the APU, and if you all have specific questions about the APU, we're happy to chat in more depth about that. I won't go into too much depth here, but this was a little bit of staff's thinking, is that there was a rezoning application submitted to the city by the applicant team. City staff reviewed that application. That was for what we call neighborhood conservation buffer. That was the zone district that they applied for. Staff reviewed that, and we also were reviewing additional potential residential zone districts that could be a good fit. But based on those findings, we couldn't find an appropriate zone district that met the purpose statements of those zone districts. So if you go in the code at the beginning of each section for residential zone, for any zone district, you'll find an intent. What is the purpose of this type of zone district? And then you'll find the list of all the permitted uses. So we were looking at not the project that they would be submitting as part of the PDP, but just the property and rezoning to that zone district. Because when city council, who would have been the decision maker, would be evaluating a rezoning application, it's not part of any plan. It's not part of any housing drawings, elevations, site plans. They're just looking at, does this zone district fit this parcel into the future? And so we as staff, that's what we're evaluating. And so we decided based on the criteria for an AP process that would be a better fit for this specific project and process. So you can go to the next slide. So recognizing this can be very technical and it can be confusing, I want to try and make it a little bit simpler in terms of what the differences are that you may notice between the two processes. So this was our initial path, the rezoning and project development plan route. So we had those two neighborhood meetings, initially the rezoning meeting and the project development plan meeting. So those were required by code for that process. The decision maker, as I mentioned, would have been city council for the rezoning. That process would have happened separately from the project development plan. A hearing officer is one individual. It would be a public hearing, but they're reviewing an application and making a decision. So it would have been two separate processes, initial decision maker, city council, and then for the plan, it would have been a hearing officer. So you would have gotten notice for both of those hearings. Two processes, two different decision makers, one for rezoning, one for the project. So the process now, we are having this neighborhood meeting to share this change in process and answer your questions. There will also be a second neighborhood meeting after their first submittal. So they'll submit their plans for their project, we'll review them, give them comments, and then we'll come back to you to share those drawings and innovations and information, and for you to be able to provide additional input into a more developed plan. So you will have a second neighborhood meeting after their initial submittal. Rather than having two processes happening, there's now one process happening. The APU and the PDP for the project development plan will be reviewed as one application, and we'll have one decision maker, which means one meeting. And so you will receive one notice for that. That is our planning and zoning commission. And so we'll go through the process. I have a process diagram with more information about that. But ultimately it changes from two decision makers and two processes to one group of decision makers and one process. Clear as mud, right? Happy to come back to any information at the end if things are unclear. So bring us back out where we're at in the process. Third neighborhood meeting, we are right here. We can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, the applicant team will submit a combined APU PDP application to us. All the city staff will review that. We'll give them comments back on their plans. That's public information. And then they will come back and we will do a second neighborhood meeting after we've had that initial review. This process continues. They continue to submit, we continue to review until they're ready to go to hearing. So this part happens a number of times before they're ready to go to hearing. Once they're ready to go to hearing, you will receive another notice. So that will be a mailed notice. If you receive a notice for this meeting, you will receive a notice for that meeting. So you'll receive a public notice. It'll also be published in the Coloradoan And that will invite you to the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. So then they make a decision at the hearing. There is an appeal period, and then if there's no appeal and if the project has been approved, then they can move forward into final drawings and after that building permits and that sort of thing. Very simple. I think that's all from me. So our applicant team will also be presenting tonight. So as I mentioned, if you have any questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end, but we're also available here after the meeting, or if you want to follow up with us, we're always available via email as well. Hand it back over to them.
All right. Yes, so we will go ahead and answer questions about anything Shauna said right after this presentation. So if you want to write them down, that is totally fine. Just to make sure we get back to them. I'm happy to hold on to those for a minute, but I'll invite our applicant up to talk a little bit about what's going on their side.
Right.
Do you want to drive, Shelley, or you want to just let me know?
I'll just let you. Okay, hold on. So my name is Shelley Lamastra. I'm with Russell Studios. We are the planners and landscape architects on this project. Tonight, we don't have a whole lot of new information to share. Most of this meeting was just about the process change that the city's directed us to take. And so for those of you that are new, we figured we've had a few new people in the room tonight. We have different folks here from our team, and we'd like to spend most of tonight just introducing ourselves, who's part of this project, what this project is envisioned with that. So if you can go ahead, the switch. So we have 3 different partners that are kind of the driving force behind this project. The Odell family. This is not the Odell Brewery. This is the Odell family that had the land donation. And then obviously part of this project is having deed restricted affordable housing. That is where Habitat for Humanity comes into play. And then Hartford Homes, who is the developer for this project. From the consultant side, myself from Russell Mills Studios and Stephanie from Northern Engineering, she's the civil engineer on this project, are here as well. You can go to the next slide. So this is where we're just going to have some different folks from the different teams come up, introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about how they're involved in this project. Turn this over to Kristen.
Okay, hi, I'm Kristen Candola. I'm the executive director of Fort Collins Habitat for Humanity. It is our 30th year building in Fort Collins. We've built about 100 homes locally. I wanted to tell you just a little bit about our role in the project and how Habitat for Humanity works. We are a nonprofit organization, and we had worked with the Odell family for about a decade and had talked over many years about how land had gotten more and more expensive and how it used to be possible to allow a partner family of ours, a buyer, to build and buy their own home. But because land costs had gotten higher and higher and construction costs and labor costs and everything else, our home buyers could no longer afford to buy our homes. And so the Odell family, after working with us for a lot of years and sponsoring homes and bringing volunteers from Odell Brewery, said, we have an idea. And so in December of last year, they donated the land adjacent, and that's why we're standing here today. Habitat has volunteers involved in our work. Habitat's been building all over the world for about 50 years, but here in Fort Collins for 30. And volunteers are really the heart and soul of what we do. You may have heard of our most famous volunteer, Jimmy Carter. Very inspiring, could do much more in his 90s than I can do now. Donors, we have, of course, the Odell family that I talked about, but we also have the little girls that do the lemonade stand every year, and the $5 monthly donor, and the donors that also sponsor houses and come together with a bunch of faith organizations or a bunch of breweries or banks, or it's an incredibly diverse group of donors. Partner families. I always get most, I think, proud to talk about our partner families, because these are the hardest working first-time home buyers you'll ever see. They not only buy their house and pay an affordable mortgage to Habitat, We're the builder and we're also the mortgage lender. They also put in hundreds of hours contributing to building their home alongside volunteers. So we've had one foreclosure since 1993. And many of our partner families will say it's because of the community involvement and the sponsors and the volunteers that, of course, they're always going to make their mortgage payment. So they're amazing home buyers. It's always important to us that we be good neighbors and that we have people that are interested and willing to contribute as volunteers, as donors, as partners, and we want to be here for the long haul. So any advocates for our work are deeply valued, and we really want to hear from you. Tapestry is the name of the neighborhood. We spent some time really thinking about this. Hartford Homes has been our partner for a number of years. So this is not a new relationship with Hartford. Landon is not here today, the owner, but he is a local builder. His dad was a builder. He's a local guy. So for about 5 years, he has been helping Habitat think about how we can become more efficient with our building, how we can find affordable lots. Then he joined our board of directors. And then when the Odell family offered this land, we said, that is an amazing piece of land. However, there are about 12 feet of detailings across the entire site. And this project is just not really feasible for your little nonprofit down the street. So Hartford had been working with us for a number of years. And as we learned and spent some time getting to know the piece of land, we talked a lot about what it took to bring this project together in the first place. And for us, the historical roots of this community being beet farm workers, of the neighborhood being workforce housing essentially, and of really the beautiful history of just this project coming together because of collaboration. That is what inspired us to think of Tapestry, that it was kind of the threads of the community coming together to make something happen, to allow people to be able to stay living here who otherwise might get pushed out. So the vision is shared between Habitat and Hartford, and that is homeownership across the board. So it'd be 30 Habitat units and 110 Hartford units. So the Habitat units are affordable deed restricted, and essentially they would serve one teacher, whereas the missing middle homes that Hartford is building would serve 2 teachers. So they're both serving a missing element of our housing supply. Hey, my Spanish isn't good enough. It's okay. This has pretty much already been said. We're grateful for everyone's come together to make it possible.
I think Sean has already gone over this, so I'm just gonna skip past this one, but this is that zoning, that we would stay industrial with that APU. This is the concept plan that was presented at our last neighborhood meeting. We have basically, I'm going to go over just a few just key points on this, but again, most of this meeting is just clarifying questions on the process and whatnot. The next meeting that is probably going to be closer to the end of the year would be more geared on updates to this plan and getting a little bit more in depth in that plan. Again, that's that second neighborhood meeting that's required for the APU or neighborhood meeting. So on this plan, a couple of things that we just wanted to point out on it. There is a widening on 3rd Street that's being completed in order to allow parallel parking on both sides of that street and two-way travel. 4th Street is a new road here on the east side, as well as an extension of Logan. Those are new streets. Both of those would have on-street parking as well, parallel parking along that. Fourth Street would, the intended vision for that is that that would become that truck access route for Odell Brewery to bring the trucks in along that street instead of Third Street as a more direct connection. Buckingham Street is the north boundary, and that street right away would be improved as well. There would be some right of way dedication that would happen there additionally. Note that the access into Tapestry, both access points there on the east side are off of 4th Street. And so that does loop around inside. All of those buildings that you see have garages along those, as well as then some additional surface parking. And then additionally, the parking along all the streets as well. And then the buffer that Shauna was mentioning is there on the east side. That's a 20-foot landscape buffer that would happen along the east side there between Tapestry and Colorado Iron and Metal. And there's a prescriptive planting density that has to happen within that buffer as well. So we will meet or exceed that. And then as far as the park and open space for this, there is a large central park open space gathering and then connections over to 3rd Street as well from that. So just a brief overview of all of that. I, at this point, will probably turn it over to everybody to ask any questions that they may have on the process or that kind of Q&A. Unless anybody has anything else they want to share.
Yeah, I just really quickly wanted to give a second for our interpreter to introduce herself. If anybody would prefer to ask a question in Spanish, she's here to help. Thank you.
I'm Alan, and I got English as well, and yes, if anyone would like to ask a question in Spanish, it's not even for any.
And then, of course, most of you are probably familiar with our ground rules. Just go ahead and raise your hand for a question. I'll call on you. And feel free to bring in your thoughts and your perspectives. We're happy to hear it all. Just make sure that when you're bringing in constructive criticism, you're not attacking persons' identities and such like that. And try to be as brief as you can, just so we can save time. Most of these are just to save time, so that we can get as many questions answered as possible in a larger group. But hopefully this evening we should have plenty of time. And I'll also turn it over to Leo to do our Q&A facilitation.
Yeah, no, thank you. And well, thank you all so much for being here today once again. And so this was supposed to be a little bit more complicated because we're hoping to have like a huge crowd. It looks like we're going to be able to keep it just up close and personal. So it looks like we're going to have plenty of time for questions. So as Em mentioned, if we could just be sure to be mindful of the guidelines that we have in place. You can ask one question, you can ask a follow-up question. And if you want to then pass it on to someone else, because you're going to have plenty of time to ask more follow-up questions. So I guess we'll go ahead and get it started. And anyone would like to go first? Yes, sir. First question.
How much will these units sell for? There's two different ones, the humanity and the art. What would be the price tag for those units?
Well, Habitat, because Habitat for Humanity is the builder and the mortgage lender, we actually base the price on the buyer. And so our goal is to make sure that each of the buyers is sustainable. And so we base the mortgage payment on 28% of someone's monthly income. And then they have a 30-year mortgage payment. So that allows for increases in property taxes and also HOA dues to buffer, so they're still comfortable with that payment. So our
About the regular units.
Yeah, I'm Dave Thorpe. I'm with Hartford Homes. So what Hartford is aiming at here is to make this serve about an 80 to 120% of area median income population. And we're a number of years away from actually selling these units, but I would guess ballpark higher 3s, lower 4s, but they're ranging from 1 bedroom to 3 bedrooms. So there's a pretty broad spread in there too.
What was it again?
I would say higher 3s to lower 4s, but we're quite a few years away from actually hitting a number on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I didn't really say is that in the last 5-ish years, the cost for our home buyers has increased by, well, about in 10 years, it's about doubled to build what we're building, which is 1,000 to 1,200 square foot home.
You managed to make that good.
Yeah, so we have to make up that difference to make it affordable, but when you take out the lot cost because the land was donated, and then you take all the site development costs and Hartford absorbs all of that, then that allows us to roll back our costs on our units to almost what someone could actually afford, which is why this is a big deal for us, helps us to actually have an affordable product.
Right.
Sorry.
Sure.
Oh, yes, ma'am. You have a question?
I just saw your hand up.
Yeah, so for me, it's pretty simple. I was thinking we pivot from NCD to APU might just mean some less density in the project, but I guess that's the density is still the same. The number of projects or the number of units, that's all still the same.
Yes, it's just a process change that goes the east direction, yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
It seems that the APU has a different meaning compared to the rezoning. So if we need to talk about something, we need to talk about meanings. And so when the APU reports 4 pages of definition of the process, the words that caught my attention are the following. So we gotta give a meaning to the time that you guys are spending here, we are spending here. And so my questions are the following. APU plan will place close attention to compatibility and impact mitigation. So I'm gonna stop there for a second. Compatibility to what? Impact mitigation. What is the impact? What do we need to mitigate from that impact and how? And the third thing, on the paragraph 8 of the Land of Code 134, additional permitted use, talks about flexibility shall be balanced with existing residential character. So, really, if we need to be meeting to the nature of tonight meetings, that is not to talk about height, not to talk about housing, not to talk about it's a bunch of don'ts, parking requirement, height limits, and density. So I'm just gonna focus on APU. So we really need to know. Forget about the process that brought the city to the energy of code there one. But this code talks about compatibility, impact mitigation, and balancing with the existing residential character. Would you please tell us that?
Sean was made up. Hi, everybody. Clay Fricky, I'm the interim planning manager for the city of Fort Collins. Just appreciate you all's time this evening. So to talk about your 3 questions, you're talking about, neighborhood character, compatibility, balancing, impact mitigation, and then balancing, flexibility with the existing character residential neighborhoods. So to talk about compatibility, I mean, I think compatibility is a little bit subjective, and the way that we've tried to address compatibility in our land use code is we have a whole section of our land use code dedicated to architectural compatibility. It's section 3.5 of our land use code, and 3.5.1 provides compatibility standards for all development, and then section 3.5.2 focuses on residential areas. And those 2 code sections are really what will guide us in our analysis of the compatibility of the project. And so we'll be looking at things, you already mentioned some of them, things like building height, building design, the way that the buildings orient towards the street. It's those types of things. And so compatibility, we're going to be looking at all those aspects of a project and comparing it to Buckingham, because that is the neighborhood that's across the street. And so the compatibility to what in this context is Buckingham, just to make that clear, when we're talking about residential compatibility.
You're comparing to back.
Correct. That is correct. So to make that very clear, in terms of impact mitigation, the reason why the addition of permitted use section is pretty vague is because we could be considering any land use that you could imagine. And so it could be something that we've never seen before, which is why those criteria are pretty general. Yeah, but when we're looking at a residential project, I mean, we're going to be looking at things like you mentioned, parking. Because I think most people are concerned about parking and traffic more than anything else. And then I think the other thing that people tend to be concerned about is the building design and especially too in areas that have a unique architectural character. And so I think those will be the main things that we'll likely focus on when reviewing this project. And then, yeah, the last thing that you're talking about was, trying to balance the needs of existing neighborhoods with something that is new and is requesting this addition of permitted use. And so again, I just want to make it clear, we're looking at mainly Buckingham from that perspective and analyzing this project in terms of its compatibility and things like that. Did that address your questions well enough?
So, if I, can I? Go ahead. So. You put accent, and I don't think you can do anything else now, to the architectural compatibility.
Sure.
Now, so in somebody's mind that is regulating their code. And I'm sorry, but they just presented the project, so the project is still what it was before. Do you see a compatibility of the presented project with existing neighborhood? For architecturally, because that's all you told me. Plus, in paragraph C, subdivision 1, they talk about this, all 8 criteria, all of them, they need to be respected. And so they talk about, again, characteristics of the land. Minimal negative impact on the use of nearby properties. They talk about several things, but there are 8 of them. So all of these criteria needs to be respected.
Correct.
Now, since we got presented again with the same project and staying always within the frame of the LPU, I don't see within the frame of LPU any architectural compatibility with what has been presented and what is existing so far. I'm just talking architecture.
Oh, sure. And yeah, I'm going to be clear real quick. I have not seen architecture for the project yet.
I just saw it.
That was it's a site plan. It's showing the building envelopes.
That's all. What you know is what I know from what has been presented.
Sure, and so we're going to analyze the architecture and compatibility once we actually have something to respond to. Right now, we've not seen a formal development application to date, so there's nothing for us to analyze either. And so what we are looking is, again, high level, the concept of multifamily on this parcel. And so, yeah, we have not had a chance to look at impact mitigation, architectural compatibility, et cetera, yet either, because the plans just aren't that baked yet. And so really the purpose of this meeting was mainly just to say, hey, this is a different process than where we started, and we want to be really transparent and open about that so that everybody understands the way that we're going to process this project. And that was sort of the main focus. However, the second neighborhood meeting, once we actually have architecture to respond to, that would be the best time to talk about the exact issues that you're talking about, because then we'll both actually be able to react to something.
But I was specifically trying to stay in
Sure.
the frame of the process.
Sure.
And I'm just making sure that I was reading right of the process and capacity. So the process is telling me that you guys are going to pay a lot of attention. There are heightened standards, right? Heightened level of review.
Yes.
So I don't care about whatever has been, I don't care about the plan. I just care about the process. I just want to make sure that we, as neighbors living here, are protected by your assessment in front of a piece of paper that you guys produced to guarantee this long-term project that you guys are projecting for the next 10 years. And tonight, I don't think I'm the only one that saw the picture of the usual project. And so with my effort to stay within the frame of the process, that impacts me again. So if the process is really considering whatever was presented tonight, and if that doesn't matter. I mean, for me, it's just your quality of assessing. I'm not assessing your process because you invited me.
Of
So
course, yeah, please, assess away.
Yeah,
That's why we're here.
so I'm just listening and reading what the process is, and since you're the expert in that, I appreciate what you're saying.
Sure, yeah, cool, thank you.
Do you mind if it sounds to me like, there's some confusion about the fact that we presented a project plan at our last meeting, and then we haven't changed anything in response to the comments that were received. Is that kind of where your confusion is coming from?
no confusion. The proper president meetings have been erased in my mind
Okay.
because
Good.
we started a new process.
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
told us that we started a new process.
Yeah.
Now, in this process, there was frame within just the assessment of the AQ. I just got the image.
Yeah.
So I completely erased what was before.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening. Yeah, I know it's my role to say anything about it. I have no voice to say, but I just said, okay, we are starting from ground zero, and ground zero was the frame of the thing. And so I saw the same thing. So, oh, okay, but
Yeah, and we're keeping that comment that we received. We got a lot of comments about what it means to have a compatible property, right? So all of that still means a lot to us.
absolutely, I
And
rely
I
on.
just want to reassure you that all of that will be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just making sure I was understanding that we are dealing, you are proposing us. Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions right now? Yes, sir. Or, yeah, and if we can give them, yeah, if you want to go ahead, sir.
I wanna know what you people that argue or whatever on the topic in First Street. Because since the last meeting we had here, I mean, we had 18-wheeler with cars, gasoline, you name it, 18-wheeler First Street. What are they doing over here? I understand it's in Brooklyn and they gotta start, but I mean, this is ridiculous. It's getting way off instead of getting better.
Thank you.
And it's, we're gonna do these buildings and everything there, and it's getting worse. So I wanna know what you got in mind to do with traffic. You know, because you people say yourself that you wanna get a sidewalk as free, so people can walk in the summertime. I haven't seen anything that, or nobody has told us that they're gonna do better than what it is now. Because like I say, we didn't used to have 18-wheelers in the First Street. Because we got a junkyard over here and all these units, we got 18-wheelers all
So,
over. They're running our street because we pay for those streets.
so sir, we are in the process of moving this project forward, and part of that process is that a traffic engineer has been hired for this project from a consultant side and is working. Steve's here from the city of Fort Collins, city traffic, and basically what happens is it's called a TIS, a traffic impact study. They scope the project, which means studying different intersections, are identified by the city that our traffic engineer, our team traffic engineer has to analyze. They're gonna analyze the daily trips, everything with that, and so that we understand what the increases to the road network is going to be and what kind of infrastructure improvements would have to happen with those increases. As we noted earlier, something that was identified in the conceptual review was that Third Street would need to be widened. That widening will happen on the east side of the project, so it won't impact the street along the west side of the existing Buckingham residence, but will move out towards the east with that. And then, as we noted, the truck traffic would be directed down 4th Street instead of 3rd Street along there. So that would move the truck traffic, at least for the Odell site, off of 3rd. I can't speak for New Belgium or any of the other businesses that are around here, but that is the idea for this connection. So that is definitely something we know that is a concern, and we are actively working with our traffic engineers and with the city and with the site plan to address.
What they can do about the speeding? I mean, they fight in there. I get up at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, they go to work and they just come flying in there.
So just to, so just to give you a little background on the traffic impact study, number one, they're not required to fix existing problems. You know, they're required to mitigate their impacts based on their traffic that they're going to generate. When it comes to existing problems like truck traffic or speeding traffic down 3rd Street, 2nd Street, 1st Street, those are things you'll need to work with our department. We have a neighborhood traffic mitigation program that we work with neighborhoods to put speed bumps on streets, and some other measures we do with police services, work with enforcement.
to try and mitigate these efforts outside of the development. If the development never came in, you still would have those same problems. So it's one of those, we do have a program in place. I know M's reached out to our program manager to look at possible mitigation efforts on Third Street. And we can continue to work with you on those as they go through the development review process as well.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Bring that back up on the side where the road should be road.
Sure thing.
There you go, right there. Can you make that bigger? There you go, right there. So.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Mhm.
See how it comes out right here? This right here is what affects the Buckingham neighborhood, is this road right here. I'm really talking to you guys. You two right there. So this has to be open, I assume. I'm saying if this was not open, there would be a huge difference in the effect on the Buckingham neighborhood. That's all I'm saying. Maybe road here, or see, there's parking here anyway. On the road right here, like this is flowing into the Buckingham neighborhood up here. This would isolate the Buckingham neighborhood if this opening was not here. That's all I'm saying. It seems very clear to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your comments there. Yes.
Was that traffic analysis already completed?
No, it hasn't. So what they'll do is, this is preliminary. They'll scope the study and then we'll review it with their first submittal. So it's one that we haven't looked at the traffic study yet.
I asked just because we noticed there was some, what I assume are the measurement tools out for only a couple days on Third Street.
So that was actually probably our neighborhood traffic mitigation program. We've been contacted, Lance, Corey is his name, and we're actually doing a speed study and the volume count right now to see what the existing traffic volumes.
Well, for what it's worth, assuming I got it correctly, and I think, yeah, that study was done for 2 days, and neither of those 2 days were a weekend day. At least when that machine was out there, and if anybody has spent any time in this neighborhood, you'd see the weekends, there's just tons of traffic, even if there's no event, and especially if there's an event at either brewery, there's 5 times more traffic easily.
Well, that's something like we can take back and we can do a study over a weekend. It's one, our typical studies, we look at an average weekday. We're looking at the Tuesday through Thursday. We're looking at that average typical traffic is what we're looking at to see what an average weekend looks like. If there's issues on weekends, which not every neighborhood has, usually traffic volumes are a lot wider in neighborhoods. We can adjust the study to accommodate that.
That could be useful. I think.
Yeah, I'll take that to Lance and see if he can do a weekend study and get some more counters out.
Cool, thanks.
Just if we can just give a chance to see if we have any other questions from anyone else right now. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
So you heard there was very thorough explanation of the difference between the zoning process and the EPU process. What I didn't catch was what makes this project distinctive that EPU is a better fit than the zoning process.
Sure. So a couple things. So when we're looking at a rezone versus an addition of permitted use, we're looking at a few things. And I'll give you a little bit of history too, as to kind of how it's informed our thinking. What happens sometimes is we get somebody that wants to do, like we'll just say a multifamily project in an area that you normally can't do it, but the conditions might work. And so they request a rezoning. And in the past, kind of more in the southwest part of town, we had a developer come to us with a project. They wanted to rezone it. It made sense. It was close to like a shopping center where we normally allow a higher density land use. Got through the rezone process. Then the development went away. And really our approval was kind of predicated upon that development. But now that area has the zone district that may not actually make sense anymore or match the neighborhood as it's evolved over time. And that's one of the issues with rezoning something is we have to think about it broadly and not just from the perspective of this one particular land use, because it might go away. And this is not an indictment of the track record of Habitat or Hartford Homes or anyone else. It's more just a fact. It's just, that's typically why we think about rezonings from the perspective as a community as a whole, rather than just one development. And so the benefit of an addition of permitted use is that it keeps the underlying zoning while still allowing a process to move forward when considering a specific use on a specific piece of property. And then it also allows us to then to focus in on the elements of that development that might impact neighbors. And so that's why we have those 8 criteria that we've already heard about earlier that really makes us focus more on compatibility and that type of thing of the development and really hone in on those aspects of the proposal to try and get an outcome that makes sense for everybody. And so that's why we have guided the developer to pursue an additional permitted use rather than a rezone. And then the other thing I would mention, this is not the case in this particular instance, because we're going from industrial, which has like a laundry list of land uses that could go in next door right now. If we were to go to a residential zone district, it would be a much smaller list of uses. In most cases, it's the opposite. We get pressure to do something that allows more intense uses rather than less intense ones. And so that's another reason why we usually don't go that route, because then you could rezone a zone district or something that only allows, a handful of uses to something like 20 something, and the same sort of logic applies. If that development goes away, then you're now opening up the possibility for a lot more intense land uses that weren't intended there. This one's a little bit different, but that's another reason why we usually would do an additional permitted use in a similar circumstance. Is that? Yes. Cool. Yeah. Yes.
May I ask you what your department is?
Term for traffic operation.
I'm negatively surprised by the fact that the traffic was assessed in this neighborhood on the weekdays. That means that I don't know what the pulse of the traffic is. What is your pulse? The pulse of your department, because the pulse that the people that live in this neighborhood have is weekdays is fine, but here comes Friday evening, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We have a completely different pulse. So I'm really surprised by the fact that the assessment of your department as being very limited to those days where really shouldn't even be super well, it could be recorded, I agree with you. But that's not the time when the traffic increase. So I don't know what tools you're using, because the reality that we live there, since we live there, is completely different. So I would appreciate if you, that should have been done already in the last probably 90 years, when this neighborhood grew more, and so with the business around. So probably the Department of Transportation and Traffic should have a pulse based on weekdays and weekend, because the reality changed. And also, if we are moving forward in a plan that is indeed for the next 10 years, we cannot have always something needs to be litigated. So it needs to be done not today, yesterday. Because whatever was there yesterday will affect what's happening today, means any other project, and what's going to happen in the next 10 years. So this balancing, it being just a little bit limited in the vision of what's happening, contradicts what you're been saying about the 10 years vision. We cannot have a 10 year visions looking just 2 inches away from my nose. I don't even see anything with my glasses, but your binocular, your lens should be 360. So I'm really disappointed by the fact, yeah, I agree with this gentleman that said, well, they were, and you told me, were recorded Tuesday to Thursday. I mean, how long has the department investigated and studied this neighborhood? You're telling me, well, we didn't do that. We never did it, but everybody knows that the life here changed Friday night. So an assessment of the traffic in those hot days should be the norm, should that be the norm, and hopefully will be the norm, because otherwise in the next 10 years, we don't go anywhere. So that is a little bit of frustration in seeing, and you are confirming that was limited. Data collections doesn't happen in 24 hours. Data collection happens in a time when the traffic is small, the time when the traffic is increased. Eventually you're right to a mean or some kind of distribution, but you need to collect the entire time. So it's a little bit, how can I say, diminishing.
I totally understand your frustration. We look at peak hours, basically those peak weekdays, because that is typically when we see our peak hour volume.
In which neighborhood?
In every neighborhood throughout Fort Collins.
Would you apply?
Not necessarily yours, yours might be a little different. That's where we can alter our study. And that's what I'm saying.
It's an identity.
We need to know these things from the neighborhood. We don't look at every street every neighborhood in town. We can't do that. We don't have the manpower, we don't have the resources to study every street in town for weeks on end. And that's where we look at our general traffic. Our busiest times are the weekends. And that's where our typical traffic and neighborhood traffic is from weekday traffic. That's why we look at those days on a general basis. Now, if there's outside studies, it's the same thing with schools. Schools have different start times that fall outside of some of the different peak hours. We can look at those things, but we just need to know about that. It's not something we sit here and monitor traffic 24/7 on every street in town. It's just impossible to do that.
I agree, but you monitor in the wrong time for this next weekend.
So, sir,
That's what I'm saying. We can't show you that.
The point is that you are assessing everything about this neighborhood, but you are applying the rule from different neighborhood. How can you do that? If you're assessing it, and then again, really, if somebody will present you with a project, I'm expecting that you give me an assessment of this neighborhood where the specific project will happen, not to the general assessment. You agree on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
At the risk of belaboring this traffic thing, this is at least a new angle, I think.
And just to preface, if I'm not mistaken, some of the future neighborhood meetings, we're gonna have time to dive a little bit deeper into, just traffic mitigation and some of those pieces. By all means, if this is where
I
some of
think,
the conversations are centering.
well, this question is about traffic, but I suppose if you zoom out a little bit, it's more about just data collection.
Okay.
And I'm not a researcher, but certainly in my schooling, learning what I did about research, it's like we're looking at a case study, when you say, we look at 2 days, we're going to generalize about 2 days about, to make plans for 3,000 days of use or 10 years. I didn't hear that 10-year number, but I saw the number 90 years. We're gonna take 2 days and plan for 90 years of use or something. I feel a little nervous about if other aspects of the project are being studied with such it's a very, very small sample size, So I wonder if anybody could speak to that sort of data collection and analysis from that view.
So I can tell you a little bit about our data plan. This is where, similar to this, yes, we look at certain projects. But we have a baseline that we start with because we have limited resources. So we're looking in our baseline, that's our typical weekday traffic. That's our baseline. That's where we start most of our studies. We can alter that. To say we're going to look at 10 weeks of data on a neighborhood street is just not feasible. We don't have the resources to do that. So we're looking at that baseline data. What's an average weekday look like? And we can look at that and say, okay, comparably throughout the city, this is what our average weekdays look like. If there's a weekend problem, we can look at that outside on a weekend specifically. But we don't necessarily start with the weekend traffic because we don't have the resources. We don't have people working weekends. We don't have people to monitor tubes on weekends. So there's limitations on what we can collect. Yes, I understand the speed bumps could last forever. I mean, they could be a permanent fixture in the neighborhood. We can evaluate it over and over again. A lot of times they don't change. Neighborhood traffic doesn't change significantly, typically on most neighborhood streets. And that's just a typical residential neighborhood street. You don't see giant increases in traffic until development happens here.
I really appreciate the feedback. Myself and JC, who was here earlier, initiated that study. So we'll absolutely get back to Lance and talk about doing a weekend study. It's really helpful for us.
And special event study, just by the way, because as you all may know, we have like thousands of people descend upon our neighborhood
Sure thing.
many times a year. With any race or any concert, all the streets are full. That whole 7.5 acres, can be full with cars.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to make sure too that we're clear again that like this project is not responsible for solving races and concerts and things like that.
Yeah.
But certainly you have to take into consideration that you're doubling the size of the neighborhood. So you are gonna make an impact.
There will be, and that is why that traffic study, the other piece that I just want to point out with this too, is that it is pretty standard protocol that it's a 2-day window that's analyzed. If a weekend gets directed to be analyzed as well, that's done. And that's part of also like the different intersection analysis that's done. The other piece that's there that helps you kind of get a bigger window of it is that the traffic engineer a lot of times will look at adjacent developments and their traffic reports to feed into it. And so there is it isn't just this pinpoint in time and this pinpoint of information. It is holistic in that sense that it is a lot of the adjacent development, the city's baseline of what's happening, and whatnot. And again, the impact that this development brings will be what this development is required to mitigate for and solve, but it won't be solving outside for those bigger issues. I do want to note too, though, that in some sense, this development will bring relief in that there is now parking along the east side of Third and parking along Logan and Fourth, and improved parking along Buckingham Street that is not there right now. And so there is a whole new capacity of parking and for distribution. When you have more streets, it distributes more traffic. And so just like anything else, it takes the load off of one specific street and allows that load to spread out. So those are really important, and we'll make sure that we communicate the weekend stuff back to our traffic engineer as well.
It's not there because the impact is not there.
You just, if we can,
Yeah, all right.
sir, please go ahead.
I want to ask you, sir, the next time I was here, I asked, I told the people from the city that, I talked to a police officer, and I asked him what I'm gonna do to get people, get tickets, get there on top of the sidewalks and all that, and get the traffic. The officer answered me. He said, we don't do that anymore. We take care of drugs and stuff like that. That's the answer he gave me. So I want to know, so you're the traffic guy, I would like to know who I'm gonna have to talk to the city council, to who I'm gonna talk to get that thing going. Because I mean, I'm not talking about one person on the traffic. You go through, that's what I say. Then I told him that time, if you want to know about Buckingham, you gotta be in Buckingham. Otherwise, you don't know that you say you don't got time to do all the city nationally. I know that. I mean, this is a big city, it's getting bigger. And I understand you don't got the people to do all that. But hey, but I need to talk to somebody. Or I need an answer. Who, what person? I gotta talk to the city council, to you, to the officer does their job. You know, and they don't do nothing until they got the orders. I don't blame the officer.
So I can speak to that maybe a little bit. I don't know who you're talking about. First of all, my name's Adam Cambridge. I'm assistant chief over in the police department. I'm actually in charge of the traffic unit. So that's several officers who engage in traffic enforcement on a daily basis. I'm not quite sure I'd like to understand the whole context of the conversation we have with the officer. So we still do enforce traffic rules and regulations in the city. We do enforce things like overstay parking, that kind of thing, when there's abandoned vehicles, all that kind of stuff. So when we get complaints, we do go out there. Now, maybe what I'm guessing, potentially what the officer was suggesting was we can't always immediately go out and address those things, given what may else be happening in the city. But to say that we don't ever do that kind of enforcement anymore is not completely accurate, if that's what was said by the officer. So whatever that's worth, just so you know, also, so everybody here knows, I have heard you talk about your frustrations with the traffic on Third Street early in the mornings, on weekends, during special events. And I will pass it on to our traffic unit to look for some directed enforcement so they can come through the neighborhood more often. We get these, just so everybody knows, we get these kind of requests all the time from everybody across the city. So you're not unique in that. Everybody is very frustrated with traffic. Me too. I live here just like all y'all, and I get frustrated with the traffic as well. So, but I will put this up on to our traffic unit so they know and hopefully help some of the problem that's to some degree.
I sure appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to ask. Who I'm gonna talk to, the officer, to get or to the city council, or who I'm gonna talk to?
The other thing is, for sure, I hear you. And I would, just so everybody here knows, I encourage you to call the police. If you have an issue and you're in front, there's speeders going on, there's
things happening that you believe are violations, things you think we should know about, please call us and we will, as we can, get out there and deal with it.
You know, my concern is my whole neighbor.
Yeah.
Because I mean, in the summertime, there are a lot of old folks that they walk on the sidewalk there. But I mean, we got a 18-wheeler or a big truck on top of the sidewalk. Hey, come on, give me a break, you know? And then I asked somebody, like an officer, and he told me, well, I wouldn't do that, when you take care of trucks, okay? Thank you.
That's not what I
did. Thank you, sir. What can I do?
I understand.
I just said, citizen, you know?
Yeah, well, I'll relay the message and make sure that we get some out there on their issues.
I said, hey, I don't blame you, guys.
No, I understand.
Yes, ma'am. Please, go ahead.
So this might be more of a reaction than a question. So I was impressed with the answer at the APU and I was hopeful about the tailoring process, which really statement that I understood what you expressed about specificity and not globalizing the zoning. The compatibility and all the sections that you also mentioned encourage me to think that this will consider the neighborhood. But I am dispirited that the character of the neighborhood, like people who live here, work here, are serving here, seem to not recognize what goes on in the neighborhood. And specifically as it relates to traffic study, that it would be news at the weekends and different, that the events are different. If you were doing studies for other places where there were huge event venues, one would know, we're not gonna just look at a Monday or a Tuesday through Thursday. That's when the peak hours occur. So that part kind of belies all of the other thoughtful sensitivity. If somebody just doesn't know, well, of course it's the weekends here.
Thank you. I do want to reiterate that we are recording, so we captured your comment and your comment. And yeah, again, the feedback is really helpful for us. We made a mistake, made an oversight, and we'll rectify it.
Anyone? Well, y'all are, yeah, so we can, yes, go ahead.
So, when I was reading some of the APU literature, it was describing how or when residents or people who aren't on the committee can give a formal opinion. Because my understanding is like there are some junctures of this process when we can say all we want, but actually it doesn't. And sometime at some point in time, it doesn't matter. And another point in time, it may matter. So is it at this next neighborhood meeting or after the plans are solidified, but again, we as a neighborhood could say, oh, by the way, this is actually how it is, not this other way, or can you tell us about the formal input process? I guess that's a succinct way to ask.
Yeah, so at any point, if you're emailing I or another staff member, that would be considered formal. That's on the record that you've given us that information. But if you're looking to give feedback on the design, the way that these are working on the site, the first neighborhood meeting is probably that second neighborhood meeting, which will be after the first submittal, which will probably be the best time, because then you're gonna see their designs. Us as staff have reviewed them once, so they're still in the early stages, and that way you have something to respond to. You can have that dialogue with the applicant team. That's still early enough in the stage where they can shift design pieces to be compatible and all these other standards that they're meeting the code. So that's a great time because it's still early in the process, but you have something to respond to. So that's a great opportunity. And then you can also email us following that meeting if you have follow-up questions or comments, and also the applicant and the team. So even if you're emailing us or having some type of comments afterwards, that's still considered formal comments and is considered, but the best time for the conversations where it's trying to understand what's going on and get feedback is usually.
And then I'll just add two things real quick, Shauna.
Yeah.
And so then like some of the comments, for example, like when to study traffic and stuff is really important now. So that way we can help scope these studies with the applicant team. So I think that's a good, so I'm glad we're having the conversation now about the distinction between weekday traffic versus weekends, as frustrating as that might be for you all. I think it's good for us to again scope that early on and make sure it's part of the development review process and we are reviewing that appropriately. And then also too, Shauna mentioned it at the beginning, the decision maker for the process for this project will be the Planning and Zoning Commission. So you'll get a mailer for that. You can go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and provide a formal comment there. You can also send us comments via email ahead of time and we'll put that in our packet of materials that we send to the commission for them to review. So that way it's part of the process and they consider your comments when making their decisions. And so those are a couple of other touch points that you can also utilize to voice your opinion one way or the other on any aspect of the project.
And is there, so can I ask a follow-up question?
But go for it.
Okay, is there any, I'm wondering about community representation on that commission? Who makes up that commission?
Yeah, so there's 7 members of the commission. We have a mobile home park resident. We have a neighborhood member from the Manson neighborhood. We have a former planner. We have, either way, people from all walks of life, from all different parts of the community that bring various different perspectives. It's not just developers, but I'd say it's about half and half, like neighborhood residents, community members, and people that have more of a background in development in one capacity or another.
And to be clear, they're all volunteers.
Yeah.
So it's a volunteer board that's appointed by council.
That's right. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, but every time I speak, it seems that I batter people because do I?
No, please,
Thank you.
yeah, go ahead.
Because the dialogue, that's the meaning of the dialogue. It's not that I don't know, want to hear what is maybe convenient or frustrating, but dialogue means I need to hear that. So, thank you. And of course, feedback, that's the way I perceive dialogue. The street, Third Street, sorry, we're talking about traffic, will be enlarged, right? Up to Logan. Am I right? Will be enlarged 8 feet, 6 feet. Yes, so if it's gonna be enlarged up to Logan, because it cannot be enlarged farther west, there will be a funnel.
It would just be the difference between parking on both sides of the street and only parking on one side of the street.
Well, the west portion of Third Street, west of Logan. South of Logan, I apologize.
Okay.
South of Logan has a parking on both sides, and
So that's,
so that means it's gonna change,
yeah,
but
so that's an older street section, and actually, that's like a typical single-family residential street section. It's 30 feet flow line to flow line, and it does allow parking on both sides of the street. We are widening it along our frontage so that it makes it easier for everybody to park. We're doing what we can to widen as
that's
much
why
as we
I'm
can.
not, really, this question.
But
was
you're
not for
right,
you.
it will
The
be
question was
parked on
for
both sides.
video for comments, that, because when you tell me that this is our project, and we just deal with our project, and the city, whatever was here, is gonna continue to here, we have nothing to do with that. We have something, actually, we have everything to do with that. So we are in between two hard rocks, whatever you're saying. Because you tell me that's our project, and the city says that was before, and we are right there. So, please think about that as well. That is in the plan for next 10 years, in the plan for the next 10 days, because people live there and older neighbors have seen many people, have seen traffic, have seen abuse of people parking on the sidewalk. To what city didn't answer so much until somebody else continued to call the city. But what I'm trying to say is, you need to listen, and I'm talking to the city, to the neighbors, because otherwise, what is your role and what is ours? Why are we even here? So the dialogue is indispensable, and I apologize, but I still do frustrated, because every time I say something, I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm offending somebody. Well, I'm expressing my feelings, right? And so, if somebody wants to give a feedback, of course, but if there is no other question, I think I may have the right to ask another one, because this is part of the dialogue. We don't go anywhere with that dialogue. Otherwise, I do this, you do this. And somebody will suffer. So let's be honest. Let's use the right word in the right meaning, and let's don't hide behind the toothy. Because really, that's where we are. Thank you.
You said you wanted an answer from the city about the street width?
I don't know to ask, man, I am a neighbors, and so if I talk to the comment from the lady was, that's what we do. We think about-
The engineer department.
Okay, I have no idea, so
Would you like me to try to answer the question?
if you may, absolutely,
I will do
I
my
would be,
best.
I would be happy, yes.
My name is Sophie Buckingham, engineering department, and, yeah, no,
I know about traffic.
So, when we talk about the type of street that we're looking at and the width that we want that street to be, part of the reason that we look at it differently for single family homes versus multifamily is because single family homes typically, I don't know how it's your neighborhood, I have not spent enough time walking the streets to know exactly how many driveways there are. But typically, and our standards, the way we review things are all based on generalizations. And then we have to, tailor them a little bit to each neighborhood to review. So in general, our standard is that a street can be 30 feet wide if there are driveways frequently along both sides of the street. So I don't know if that's the case in your neighborhood. I'm gonna have to go and look when I get to my desk tomorrow. But along multifamily, it's pretty much guaranteed that there's not gonna be that same frequency of driveways because it's an apartment building. It's not gonna have, 7 different houses along the block, each with a driveway. It's probably gonna have 1 or 2 driveways. And when you have a lot of driveways along the street, it breaks up people's ability to park. So we automatically require a street to be wider when we know that there's gonna be multi-family apartment buildings on at least one side of the street. So when you're talking about the funnel, it's a good question, and I'm gonna think about it a little bit more. If there's driveways on both sides of the street, I don't know that it would act like a funnel because the street feels a little bit wider, but there's not back to back to back parking. But again, we need to keep in the neighborhood context. But I hope that gives you a little bit of an understanding of why that section of the street is being wide.
I understand because it cannot be done otherwise either.
Right,
So the other point is, you're traffic, right?
engineering.
Engineering. So this project will bring 140 houses and they are supposed to provide, if I remember well, because I raised those first meeting, 210 parking. No, 240. They said that they were going to go only for 210, maybe. I still cannot measure and see where those 210 cars would be, if not in the street, on the street.
They're coming south on Third Street to Lincoln.
As well, so again, mine is an invitation to look at the entire pie in which, as soon as possible, in which the cherries are the human being that will be living there. Because it's very easy to say, this is my portion, by the way, that's your fault, kid. What the heck? And I did my job. Well, he and I are living in the same place. So in the dialogue, he and I should talk. Because what we do today will have a repercussion on every single thing. And since the city is looking at this, in my opinion, in a very nice way, because what you do today will have a repercussion. Mine is an invitation. And again, I don't know what my thoughts or my subject invitation could be, or if it will be even considered when and how and by whom. But I would love if, as a volunteer, my life is all volunteer. If you guys are not offended by my presence or my way of dialoguing, I would be more than happy to sit on whatever you decide. So, and by the way, I don't receive the letters. This poor gentleman here said, Antonio, did you get the letter? No, I didn't. And every single time, and again, I erased those 2 previous meetings, the other previous meeting, we wrote our address, but we still don't receive it. So I have a miserable photocopy that I print from my phone, but thanks, because why don't I receive a letter? So I'm gonna put my address again. I'm not trying to be belligerent, because by nature I'm not, but I talk and I like the dialogue. And I listen and I see the big pie. So, and I don't like when somebody gives me this narrow corridor because I know something's gonna happen. the street should be open again, maybe. I don't know, but I need to think about a little bit more for the future. And the same thing, the future is to provide your houses. I look into that and I appreciate what you're doing. But I like the city that tonight showed me a little bit of being unprepared for whatever is happening in this neighborhood, to be more involved. And I understand manpower is already, my gosh, yes, but instead of using the manpower on those 2 days, well, let's use them Friday and Saturday at the end of your shift. The city will pay you a beer, a dodel or a wine. It's an incentive to make sure those people are part of a project that is bigger than them. It's not just doing my little job and I'm done at 5 o'clock. It's more of that. That is part of being in the community. My opinion.
I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I feel like I just want to say it as one of the partners in the project, is that I think somehow it's coming across as if the current context doesn't matter. And I just wanted to speak there that I don't think that the project team is saying that at all. The traffic study that will be done will take into account the project, but it doesn't mean that anyone sitting here that's part of the project team doesn't think what currently is happening matters. I feel like I have to say that. I live on the wrong side of 9. I've gone for my city friends here. I got stuck on the wrong side of the train multiple times today. I do go through this neighborhood every single day. I think it was really heard by the project team that a weekend day needs to be part of the traffic study. So I just wanted to say that because I feel like it's coming across as nobody's getting heard. And I don't exactly know why, but I think there was a bit of a miss there. So
We have 2 of us now.
Yeah.
We have the same perception.
yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knows that
Oh,
you're being.
I want to add to something you said. I'm Sarah Coates with Fort Collins Habitat as well. And one thing broader than the traffic considerations that we're looking forward to is just a partnership with the Buckingham neighborhood as a community neighbor and friends. We have lots of visions and ideas of how to have long-term partnership with the neighborhood, and we're looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly relevant, and I know we're sort of talking about parking and traffic and just this project right now, but Habitat does a lot of different things. We help people with aging in place and building ramps and weatherization and critical home repair and offer low interest loans to do those kinds of things if people need that. We really do want to be here for the long haul. So making sure that people know that and that 30 years here means that we're going to stay invested, not just in the community, but hopefully in this neighborhood. That's the context that we're coming from. So I just want to be sure that you all know that.
And ma'am, I know you had a question.
I'll wait, because
Yeah, we'll know in the, 7:24, so I don't know. Oh, ma'am, yes.
Yeah, it's not really a question as much as a reaction to what you said, I think. But I do want to emphasize that I get this feels overwhelming, lots of units, traffic, parking, but it's a chance to have the neighbors too. And I think that's part of community building. And so when I look at this design and I know I'm gonna be weird within groups, like I feel they're almost too cut off. I look at these as being new neighbors and help this to care about traffic problems or those. So there's a lot of logistics to be figured out. But I just want to remember that when I moved into this neighborhood, and actually I'm not living in it right now, with renters that have property right now. But coming to the neighborhood, I like seeing my neighbors teach their daughters to ride bikes on the streets. I enjoy talking to my neighbors across the street until one of the medicine. You know, it's like it was a neighborhood, and I hate to think of these new neighbors moving in and feeling unwelcome.
Whoever would be always well. I think, I mean, we've been talking now for a few weeks altogether, but
I thought you erased those meetings. I'm just kidding.
I know I raised the cherries.
I
I get them. I protect them, so I can, it's really a research.
I've got one last question.
Sorry.
Yes, you go ahead.
I want to, yes, about it's here. So building on that, my question. The real question. My question relates to the present use of some of the property of the 7.5 acres that now is in part of this project. At least 50% of that is open parking. not necessarily for a special event, for a formal weekend here. So it might be slightly out of the scope of the project, but that it does have to do with business conditions. What thoughts?
The Odell family currently retains the kind of inverted L shape. And I don't think that there are firm plans for what would happen.
Say the inverted L.
Or, yeah, the,
Can't see it.
Yeah, you can't see it on.
There's a portion just south of Logan here that he's talking about.
there's a, it's about 200 feet wide or, I don't know, 150.
It's a little wider in the park.
It's in the field that the Odell family retains, as well as that eastern edge from the north and west of Colorado Iron and Metal. For the north-south segment of that, I don't think there are any firm plans. Thanks. For the east-west portion, I know that the Odells have submitted a conceptual review package to the city for increased parking, and we don't know where that would land as a standalone project done separately from this project, but this design would not preclude that activity taking place and would leave vacant field south of Logan, north of the current parking lot. So there is still an open area. As we told, is that fair play?
Is it reasonable to think that part of the scope of this, would be looking at those parking spaces would be displaced with high spaces, but
I don't-
know that this would be possible L shape for an would accommodate those.
I don't know that those are considered official parking spaces.
Yeah, that's right. So to be clear, like the dirt lot right now, like we didn't look at that as part of the approval for the Odell Brewing Company way back when we approved it initially. So yeah, right now, those are parking spaces that are not accounted for in any city document. And so, yeah, sure.
It wasn't part of the original plan because that much parking requirement wasn't anticipated to be needed. So they just rolled over into that field that was there. Is that what you meant?
And so well, I should also say too, it's not like we haven't looked at the Odell property in like 25 years. They've expanded their operations, and as they've expanded, we've approved more parking. However, yeah, I mean, it gets obviously super busy on weekends. And we know that people park up the hill. I've parked up the hill. I think most people in this room have probably parked up the hill that don't live in the neighborhood to go to Odell at one point or another. And so I think to Dave's point is, yeah, we're reviewing an application right now to ensure that there is still some parking retained on that site. Perhaps maybe reconfigured and formalized so that way there's less of an impact on the neighborhood, because again, we don't want to be putting tons of cars on your streets and making you angry. We want to make sure that they're dealing with their impact on your neighborhood too, as part of that development application. So that's what we're working on with that as well.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. It seems like it might have a good effect.
Sure.
Those places, like those parking spots in this place, and there's not sufficient formalized parking, and people want to park wherever they can.
Sure.
So, as mentioned before too, with that new parking along, and the gentleman here referenced as well that there is a code section that does allow for multifamily that has interior streets to utilize some of that on-street parking for their parking requirements. So that is happening along some of these streets, but even when you count the spaces that would technically be counted as part of the Tapestry condos. I can't remember exactly, but I think we had close to 50 additional on-street parking spaces that were being provided with the new 4th, Logan, 3rd Street parking and the Buckingham parking improvements. So I would assume that would take some of that. Obviously, I don't know how many people are up there, but it is providing above and beyond what's there right now, even when you factor in the residents of Tapestry.
So you're saying 4th is, you can park on either side of 4th?
Yes, so 4th has parking on both sides. Logan has parking, the Logan extension on both sides, and then Buckingham, and then 3rd Street's being one.
Well, I believe we've run out of time. Sir, is there anything?
No, we are talking about the same mitigation of something. The space The customers will be the same, if not more. We just remove the space, now we're reducing the parking. So again, you see how the piece of the puzzle need to be worked by the city at 360 degrees, because we neighbors are the ones who waste. And so the concept, thank you, man, for noting that, literally, you remove the parking, now we need to mitigate that. And of course, whoever builds there doesn't have the obligation nor the duty of getting there. We don't, the city does. But city now is having a full menu on their table. Having this parking, us, and the new project. But why don't we see that as a community at this point? Again, my invitation is, let's look at that in a different lens.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening. Sorry.
No, we appreciate the dialogue, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And I don't know if you want to just show the next steps real quick once again.
Yeah, absolutely. This is gonna be, again, a repeat from last meeting. Just because we're inching forward here in this project, so. I really appreciate all of you coming for a third time. I hope to see you all again for our fourth meeting. Especially you, I'll make sure that you get your letter next time. So we will have another meeting coming up. I haven't scheduled it yet, but it'll be after the folks submit their first submittal, so there'll be a lot more to react to. There'll be pictures and stuff like that that you guys want to kind of sink your teeth into. And then, of course, public comment is open from here to the very end of this project. So my email address is right here. And I take public comment on this project until the very end. So answering your question